Hey, Mike here. I just wanted to let you know that you can listen to Dark Poutine early and ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime.
Oh, look at that. I see my friend Matthew there. Welcome back to Dark Poutine. I'm Mike Brown.
Hello, Michael Brown. This is Matthew Stockton.
Yeah, hi, Matthew Stockton. You look like you have happy eyes this morning, I must say.
Oh, do I?
You do. You seem like you've been in a good place lately.
Yeah, just going with the flow.
Going with the flow. It's funny how things work a lot better when you do that.
I'm truly going with the flow, and everything's great, and people are wonderful, even when they're weird and angry. They're fascinating, right?
Yeah.
I've determined that I'm sort of just going to be, even in my private life, a bit of a cultural anthropologist, which I'm at work, and just like study people and not get emotionally engaged if they're angry.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, it's good. It's good. I made a Malaysian lamb curry last night. Boy, oh boy, was it delicious.
What goes into a Malaysian lamb curry besides lamb?
Malaysians and lamb.
Malaysians and lamb. Okay, with that, let's carry on with Dark Poutine and this episode.
Well, I figured that was dark, so it fits.
It does. I want curry poutine now. Oh, that sounds good.
Curry poutine is lovely.
The views, information, and opinions expressed during the Dark Poutine podcast are solely those of the producer and do not necessarily represent those of Curious Cast, its affiliate, Global News, nor their parent company, Chorus Entertainment.
Dark Poutine is not for the faint of heart or squeamish. Listener discretion is strongly advised. We're not experts on the topics we present, nor are we journalists. We're two ordinary Canadian schmucks chatting about crime and the dark side of history. Let's get to it. Put on your toque, grab yourself a double-double and a Nanaimo bar. It's time to scarf down some Dark Poutine.
You are responsible for obtaining and maintaining at your own cost all equipment needed to listen to Dark Poutine. Dark Poutine can be addictive. Side effects may include, but not be limited to, pausing and questioning the system, elevated heart rate, pondering humanity, odd looks from colleagues as you laugh out loud at work, family members not into true crime worrying about you. Positive side effects may include some perspectives and opinions that you disagree with, as well as some wokeness and empathy. If you don't think Dark Poutine is for you, consult your doctor immediately.
On July 31st, 1987, an ordinary summer afternoon in Edmonton, Alberta, ended in catastrophe. A powerful F4 tornado cut through the city's southeast, killing 27 people and leaving entire neighborhoods destroyed in minutes. In this episode, we examine the second-deadliest tornado in Canadian history through first-hand survivor accounts and direct statements from officials who faced a disaster few believed could happen in a major Canadian city. The day would later become known as Black Friday, a name repeated in municipal histories and anniversary coverage. On July 31st itself, it was still just another Friday afternoon. You're listening to Dark Poutine episode 402, Black Friday, the 1987 Edmonton tornado. Just after Christmas in 2025, I found myself stuck in Halifax during a winter weather event that on paper didn't look all that serious. Snow, wind, ice-covered roads and runways, and of course, delays. The kind of thing Atlantic Canadians deal with every year. Flights were cancelled. Roads slowed to a crawl. People scrambled to find alternate ways home. Some of us weren't so lucky and ended up sleeping on airport floors or in hotel rooms gifted us by generous listeners thanks to travel points. What stood out wasn't how bad the weather was, but how casually it was treated at first. There was no clear breaking point where everything suddenly fell apart. Instead, things failed gradually. We were the first plane on the runway to get turned around. Plans, of course, changed, services stopped, and before long, people were stranded and angry. Most of us were more frustrated by the waiting than concerned about why travel had shut down in the first place. As sanity settled in, I began to realize that had we flown in those conditions, maybe I wouldn't be here to have this conversation. The experience stuck with me, and so I vowed to do a weather-related episode of Dark Poutine afterward. For me, this was a reminder that in Canada, the most dangerous weather isn't always the kind that looks dramatic. It's often the type we think we understand. I can drive in that. The kind we've seen before. It's just a little ice. I mean, why can't they take off? That familiarity can make it easy to underestimate what's coming. That same misunderstanding and lack of respect for the power of nature shaped what happened in Edmonton on July 31st, 1987. Edmonton that Friday morning moved at a familiar pace. It was midsummer. Schools were out. Construction sites were active across the city. Shopping centers were busy with payday traffic. Families were preparing for weekend travel. Southeast Edmonton, including Millwoods, was still growing rapidly, filled with new subdivisions, trailer parks, and commercial developments. The Evergreen Mobile Home Park was included in that expansion. It was home to families, retirees, and shift workers. Mobile homes rattled during storms, something residents were accustomed to. Wind, thunder, and heavy rain were not unusual experiences there. The weather conditions that day were unsettled but not remarkable. Heat and humidity had built up through the afternoon. Thunderstorms were forecast across central Alberta. These were conditions people recognized. They'd seen them before. Environment Canada meteorologists were monitoring the situation. Storm cells were developing west of Edmonton. Radar showed increasing organization within those systems. Internally, concern was growing. Publicly, the day still looked normal. According to Tornado, a report, Edmonton and Strathcona County, July 31st, 1987, by the Government of Alberta, a tornado or twister is a violent, rotating column of wind that forms beneath a thunderstorm and reaches the ground. It is usually visible as a funnel-shaped cloud, though rain, dust, and debris can hide it. Tornadoes are much smaller than the storms that produce them, rarely wider than a kilometer, and they move with the storm system at speeds of roughly 20 to 70 kilometers an hour. Most tornadoes have wind speeds under 115 kilometers per hour and cause limited damage. These weaker tornadoes are classified as F0 on the Fujita scale, which ranges from F0 to F5, with F5 being the rarest and strongest. At the time, Edmonton had no experience with a violent tornado striking a dense urban area. Tornadoes were understood as rural events associated with open farmland and small towns. While Alberta had seen tornadoes before, the idea that one could move directly through a major city was not part of the public imagination.
Yeah, and I think what's fascinating about all of this is it's a very human belief or idea, as you say. But the storm isn't an idea, right? Mm-hmm. And it didn't arrive to threaten a city or to spare a city. It just existed, and the city happened to be there.
It just showed up.
Tornadoes aren't acts or reactions. You know, they're outcomes of physics, unfolding without reference at all to any human meaning. And that's one thing people go, oh, it was like this big evil storm. It's like, no, this is nature just being what it is.
I loathe act of God as a reason for anything.
Right? It's not.
Like, no.
It has nothing to do with human meaning and what our ideas are of it. It just is.
Yep. In the days leading up to July 31st, 1987, Alberta experienced frequent thunderstorms with daily reports of severe weather. On July 30th, 1987, the day before the deadly tornado, a weak F0 tornado briefly touched down near Nisku, just south of the city. It lasted only seconds and caused minor damage, limited to a small area that included the destruction of a small barn. Tornadoes of this kind are relatively common in Alberta and often go largely unnoticed, shrugged off because of their short duration and limited impact. This mattered because preparedness depends on expectation. Emergency systems rely on people knowing how to respond. In 1987, many Edmontonians did not know what a tornado warning meant or how seriously to take it. Forecasts issued early that morning warned of a high likelihood of heavy thunderstorms, followed by updated predictions of hail, damaging winds, and intense rainfall. Weather radio broadcasts and media interviews emphasized the threat of extremely strong and violent storms, and a severe weather watch was issued for Edmonton by early afternoon. However, there was no system in place to force broadcasters to interrupt programming. If a station chose not to break in, the warning might not be heard at all.
Of course, none of that matters to the storm itself again, right? The tornadoes don't arrive faster because warnings fail or slower because they succeed. They form, they intensify, they move according to the forces that operate outside of our timelines.
Yep.
The thing here is, by the time people decided what a warning meant, the event was already well underway, right? And we tend to describe disasters as moments where people fall behind events, but it's not. They just happen. And these warning systems, even when they work at their best, how quaint.
Yeah.
These warning systems. You have a photo, I don't know if you could put it online, the power of this tornado. It was huge, Mike.
An F4, it's huge. It's a big one.
Huge, yeah.
The only thing more powerful is an F5. Just remind me of Bill Paxton and Twister. Remember that movie, Twister?
I love disaster films.
Me too.
I watched 2012 last night.
Okay, yeah.
The special effects for the time were amazing, though.
They were, yeah. Yeah,
and they saved the dog,
good.
so I was happy.
But your conversation about warning systems, it just reminds me of the response to the tsunami in the Indian Ocean. How, more warning systems were implemented. But whether or not people pay attention to a warning is another matter entirely. You cannot...
And it changes over time. Because if you get lots of warnings...
You become accustomed to them, and like the boy who cried wolf, you ignore them.
There's this Amber Alert thing that I was getting all the time for a while here in Vancouver. And I'm just like, I live in the city up here, and everyone I've looked at has been like, they're in Alberta, right? And so I kind of stopped looking because I'm like, you start, which is bad in a way, because you're like, I'm not going to, like, I've been trained that I get these and I never see anything. So if you put in too many warnings for tsunamis or tornadoes and you get them all the time in the summer, they'll be ignored as well, right?
Yep. That afternoon, the tornado-producing storm merged with the other intense thunderstorms in the area as it approached the city, generating reports of large hail, strong winds, and heavy rain across the region. One of the first people to see the tornado was a dog breeder, Thomas O. Taylor. Tom Taylor of Leduc, Alberta, 35 kilometers south of Edmonton, spent the morning of July 31st, 1987, training his English Labrador retrievers for an upcoming field trial. Taylor later eloquently journaled his version of events on his website. After feeding and watering the dogs at noon, he noticed the weather beginning to change. As he walked back to the house, quote, unusually large raindrops began falling from the fast-moving scattered clouds overhead, end quote, signaling the end of several days of intense heat. Inside, Tom heard the storm intensify. He recalled, quote, I could hear the rainfall increase in intensity. Occasional hail rang off the roof and vents. Angry peals of thunder started, so I hastily got out of the bath. The rain became so heavy that the, quote, backyard became foggy, end quote. Without warning, the storm shifted again. Suddenly, the torrential rain stopped as if driving under an overpass, he said. Looking out a bedroom window, Taylor noticed, quote, a small wasp-shaped cloud hanging beneath the base of the cloud deck, end quote, later realizing it was a wall cloud beginning to form. Moments later, he witnessed the tornado itself. Quote, suddenly, a thin, translucent funnel flashed onto the landscape. I could see through it, end quote. It was 2:51 p.m. Tom described debris moving upward around the funnel, noting that, quote, the funnel connected the cloud base to the ground below. This was a tornado. It had touched down inside the eastern edge of Leduc, Alberta, end quote. The first touchdown was brief. Quote, then it was gone, just as suddenly. It had lasted only 10 seconds, end quote. Taylor moved upstairs and observed an eerie calm. Quote, rain was pouring down all around, but not in my location. I was in the center of something, end quote. Recognizing the danger, he contacted the Edmonton Weather Office, unsure of what he had seen. He asked whether there was a tornado near the Edmonton International Airport and was asked in return if he had seen a funnel. After what he described as, quote, a rapid exchange, the Weather Office ended our conversation so that they could issue a tornado warning, end quote. Taylor watched as the storm intensified again. Quote, as the cloud traveled toward Beaumont, Alberta, the belly slumped, spitting out a huge funnel which slammed onto the ground below, end quote. He observed the tornado as it moved northeast, saying, quote, I watched as the tornado churned along, exploding buildings it encountered, end quote. He then saw it turn northward, where it, quote, raked the eastern edge of Edmonton, Alberta, causing death and destruction, end quote. Tom Taylor was later recognized for his actions and awarded for his timely warning about the tornado. Interesting story with this guy.
Yeah, and he really had a way with words. I liked what he wrote there.
Yeah.
You know, he's not technical or dramatic. He's kind of precise and observant, but it's all quietly unsettling. And it's like the language of someone describing what he sees before he even really fully understands what it is. Like, there's something quite, the way he described that stuff, I was fascinated with that.
Yeah, I mean, he wrote that perhaps years after, so he had time to reflect.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
Yeah, his writing about it is very good.
Yeah.
From Environment Canada, quote, radar and satellite indicated rapid intensification of the line of thunderstorms as it moved toward Edmonton at 70 kilometers per hour. A severe weather warning was issued at 14:45 hours, with as yet no reports of severe events being reported from weather stations or weather watchers. By 14:45 hours, a new thunderstorm cell had developed explosively near Leduc ahead of the previous line of storms. At 14:55 hours, a tornado dropped to the ground from this cell briefly and retracted. It struck again near Beaumont as the Edmonton tornado and remained on the ground for an hour over a 40-kilometer, 25-mile path. At 14:59 hours, a call reporting a tornado was received, the source being a member of the general public. A tornado warning for Edmonton was issued, end quote. By the time the tornado reorganized near Beaumont, it had become a sustained, violent system moving steadily toward a populated urban area. Radar showed the storm accelerating and strengthening as it tracked northeast, its path now aligned with the southeastern edge of Edmonton. What had begun as a localized weather event south of the city was turning into something far larger. Inside Edmonton, most people were unaware of what was approaching. The tornado warning had been issued, but awareness was uneven. Some residents heard it on weather radio. Others missed it entirely. Television and radio programming continued in many places without interruption. For those who did hear the warning, there was little guidance on what to do next. Tornado safety was not something most Edmontonians had practiced or even discussed. Traffic continued moving along arterial roads. People were still outdoors. Construction crews remained at work. In Millwoods and surrounding neighborhoods, residents noticed the sky darkening and the wind shifting direction, but storms were common enough that few interpreted these signs as urgent. The storm itself was now visibly different from the thunderstorms that had passed through earlier in the week. The cloud base lowered. Light faded rapidly. Wind gusts arrived in sharp bursts rather than steady flows. Hail began to fall in some areas, large enough to damage vehicles and windows. Rain intensified, then fell unevenly, heavily in some locations and absent in others. Emergency services had begun receiving scattered calls about downed power lines, damaged roofs, and sudden flooding. At this stage, there was no single picture of what was happening. Reports were fragmented, coming in from different parts of the city and surrounding communities. Dispatchers were dealing with incomplete information while the storm continued to move. As the tornado crossed into the southeastern edge of Edmonton, it did so with little physical warning at street level. There was no gradual transition. In some areas, calm conditions gave way almost instantly to destructive winds. Residents later described a sudden pressure change followed by intense noise and flying debris. The first structures in the tornado's path were struck with overwhelming force. Roofs were torn away, walls collapsed, Vehicles were lifted and thrown. In mobile home parks and lightly constructed buildings, destruction was nearly immediate. Power failed across wide areas as transmission lines were brought down. Within minutes, the scale of the disaster became clear to those on the ground. Streets were blocked by debris. Emergency vehicles struggled to reach affected areas. Communication between agencies became increasingly difficult as infrastructure failed. What had been an ordinary Friday afternoon had now become a mass casualty event unfolding in real time.
Yeah, and what strikes me in moments like this, how quickly meaning drops away. Like, there's no build, there's no sense of transition. Ordinary life doesn't wind down or give notice.
No, there's no music to indicate the shark is there.
Right. It's replaced. Ordinary life is just instant replaced. So one moment belongs to routine and the next belongs to physics. And from that point, human intervention barely factors in at this point, right? And it's not chaos as much as like scale asserting itself, right? I was reading the script that you gave me, I was trying to put my place in like just how huge and how strong this was, right? And how when it hits you, you're helpless, right? So human life and all of our beliefs and how things should unfold are shown to be ridiculous in front of the force of nature like this, right?
Look at our reaction to the COVID pandemic, for example. Yeah. I mean, we're still reacting to that. Our markets are reacting. People's beliefs changed after that. It's really fascinating to see from, as you put it, a cultural anthropological viewpoint of how we deal with major events.
Yeah.
The destruction left by the Edmonton tornado unfolded unevenly but relentlessly, shaped by the storm's shifting intensity and the kinds of structures it encountered. In some places, damage appeared almost surgical. The tornado that carved a path through the southeast of the city revealed within minutes how vulnerable everyday infrastructure could be when exposed to sustained violent winds. As the tornado entered Edmonton, it struck residential areas first. Houses built to typical suburban standards lost roofs, exterior walls, and windows in seconds. Garages collapsed inward. Debris from one property became projectiles that damaged the next. Streets filled with lumber, insulation, furniture, and shattered glass. In some neighborhoods, homes on one side of the street were heavily damaged, while those directly across suffered less, an early indication of the tornado's narrow but destructive core. The Evergreen Mobile Home Park was among the hardest hit areas. Mobile homes designed for affordability and speed of construction rather than resistance to extreme wind offered little protection. Many units were lifted from their foundations, rolled or torn apart entirely, frames twisted, walls separated. In several cases, mobile homes were reduced to scattered debris fields with no clear indication of where a structure had stood moments earlier. Survivors later described recognizing their homes only by small personal items recovered from the wreckage. Vehicles parked throughout the park were thrown or crushed. Some were flipped onto their roofs. Others were carried short distances and dropped into piles of debris. The force required to move these objects left little doubt about the wind speeds involved. Emergency responders arriving later found vehicles embedded with wood and metal fragments, evidence of the tornado's internal violence. Beyond the trailer park, the tornado moved through industrial and commercial areas where the scale of destruction shifted but did not lessen. Warehouses lost large sections of roofing, exposing interiors to rain and debris. Steel-framed buildings buckled where wind entered through loading bays, and pressure differences caused walls to fail outward. In some cases, entire facades collapsed, spilling contents into parking lots and roadways. Construction sites in the path of the storm became especially dangerous. Loose materials such as lumber, scaffolding, and sheet metal were caught up and hurled at high speed. These objects damaged nearby structures and created hazards well beyond the tornado's immediate footprint. The aftermath showed how quickly ordinary building materials could become lethal when lifted by rotating winds. Power infrastructure suffered widespread damage. Transmission lines were torn down. Utility poles snapped or were pulled from the ground. Entire neighborhoods lost electricity without warning, plunging homes and businesses into darkness even as the storm continued. With power failures came the loss of communications. Telephones stopped working in many areas. Radio contact between emergency services became unreliable as repeaters failed or lost power. Roads were blocked almost immediately. Falling trees, debris piles, and overturned vehicles made many streets impassable. Traffic signals went dark. In some locations, asphalt was stripped or gouged by debris dragged along the surface. Emergency vehicles attempting to reach affected areas were forced to reroute repeatedly, losing precious time as conditions continued to change. The tornado did not move in a straight, predictable line. It shifted slightly north and south as it progressed, creating pockets of intense destruction alongside areas of comparatively minor damage. This variability complicated rescue efforts. From the air and from ground level, it was difficult to assess where help was most urgently needed. Some blocks appeared devastated. Others, just a short distance away, looked largely intact. As the storm moved deeper into the city, it continued to damage schools, apartment buildings, and commercial strips. Windows shattered across wide areas, sending glass into streets and interiors. Roof sections peeled away from larger buildings, exposing insulation and wiring. Rain poured into open structures, compounding damage and creating additional hazards for anyone trapped inside. We'll take a short break here, and when we return, we'll learn more about the destructive impact of the F4 tornado on Edmonton and its residents, as well as the storm's aftermath. And we are back, Matthew, at the halfway point. Thoughts so far?
It's funny, like it's this idea that size protects us. We're in the city, we're going to be fine. Cities feel safer because they're, I think, busy and structured, right? And so much effort has gone into making a city work by other people who do other things. If you live in the country, you have to make that stuff work yourself. So I think city dwellers like me, you kind of you don't register the forces of nature as much as you do in the country. I grew up in a small town where we did, and I know that feeling. But I was sitting here thinking, this Cascadia, like the tectonic plates here.
Yeah,
we are overdue, not in a movie sense, but technically overdue for a 9.0 massive earthquake, which would flatten all of the buildings downtown and the one I'm in, right?
Right.
But we kind of just feel, oh, that's not going to happen while I'm alive because it's too big to comprehend.
It's like trying to wrap your brain around World War III and nukes and all that kind of stuff. As kids, we're inundated with all that talk about it, but you couldn't really imagine it. You couldn't.
No, you can't. And the other thing about this is we, as humans, we try to make sense of everything. And these events, they're not, we learn things about ourselves or about society when they happen, but the events don't show up to correct us or to teach us anything. Right? They happen when the conditions line up, when the tectonic plates are pushed together, when physics and the wind and the temperature and everything are right? There's no meaning in it. They're just forces. But we put all of this meaning into these things. And it makes us feel small when we have to admit that, this tornado isn't judging us.
Right.
And it's not judging us.
Right.
It's just,
it doesn't wipe out a trailer park because God hates trailer parks.
No, it just is, and that makes me feel even smaller, right?
Right.
Yeah.
The sound of the tornado and its effects became part of the experience for those in its path. Survivors later described a constant roar, punctuated by sharp impacts as debris struck buildings. The noise did not fade quickly. According to a Reader's Digest article, quote, eyewitnesses described a roaring sound like a freight train as 400-kilometer-per-hour winds exploded buildings and tossed cars around like toys, end quote. It was later determined that the Edmonton tornado was rated F4 on the Fujita scale, with estimated wind speeds of 333 to 418 kilometers per hour, strong enough to level well-built structures and throw heavy vehicles. Several of the following first-hand accounts come from a CBC article marking the tornado's 25th anniversary and its destructiveness. John Marzolf, working at Computalog Gerhard Limited near 19th Street and 84 Avenue, watched the funnel approach and the building fail. A bunch of us gathered at the wash bay door to watch the tornado approach, none of us thinking it might be a good idea to clear the area. As it came closer, we could see the damage it was doing in the flashes as it ripped transformers from the poles as it moved northward along 34th Street. End quote. Marzolf remembered clinging to a crane as the tornado plowed into the property. Quote, I held on to an A-frame crane that was about as stable as Maggie Trudeau, and remember the roof moving up and down about 3 feet. It lasted about 30 or 40 seconds, and then everything settled down. He continued, quote, I discovered a few things during the tornado. One of them that I was nowhere near as brave as I thought I was, and that your life can change in a flash. End quote. Dale Campbell was driving on the Sherwood Park freeway and caught in the traffic jam when the tornado hit. Quote, I got out of my car to help people and got thrown 30 feet into a field. We picked up bodies and took them to the ambulances on the freeway. End quote. Michelle Lovell, who was 10 years old, in Clairview, spoke to CBC about the moments before impact. Quote, when it began to hail, my stepmother sent us out to pick hailstones, not realizing the danger. Dad brought that to an end quickly, end quote. She recalled the tornado touching down, quote, just a few blocks away, devastating nearby homes. An anonymous Beaumont resident, age 14, recalled seeing the tornado skirt the community's edge, shared later in an Edmonton discussion forum. Quote, just as I walked in the door, the phone rang, and it was our neighbor screaming, there's a tornado. I moved the curtain aside, and sure enough, a spindly tornado bounced up and down, slowly moving around Beaumont from the south to the east. Then it traveled up 50th Street toward Millwoods. We were so lucky that it went entirely around Beaumont. End quote. As we mentioned, Evergreen Mobile Home Park suffered the highest concentration of fatalities and total destruction. In a Reddit comment years later, Chico Bulmer, Evergreen property manager, talked about seeing the tornado and getting people underground. Quote, I looked out the window of my office and saw a huge black cloud eerily whirling toward the building. I knew there was only one place to go. I knew exactly what it meant, and I got my staff into the basement. Then I heard kids screaming on the playground, and I went out and got 20 or 30 in the basement. End quote. He said after emerging from the basement, quote, I saw the twister pick up trailers and throw them around like paper cups, end quote. Perhaps the most dramatic moment of the tornado came when 6-pound, 1-week-old Kristen Gregoire was ripped from her grandfather's arms by the powerful swirling winds of the tornado. According to the Edmonton Journal, Kristen was torn from her grandfather's arms and thrown nearly 100 meters as the trailer park was destroyed. When the storm passed, she was gone. Her mother, Monique Gregoire, had been trapped beneath the rubble of her parents' flattened trailer. For hours, she had no idea whether her baby was alive or dead. Kristen was eventually found alive by a stranger who carried her out of the wreckage. Monique later learned what had happened from a friend who witnessed the moment. Monique recalled it this way, quote, this guy just walks up and gives her the baby. When she turned around, he was gone. It was kind of holy, end quote. Edmonton police officer Bill Clark rushed the tiny infant to a hospital. During the drive, he repeatedly pinched her arm or leg to make sure she was still alive. Monique later said, quote, I give him a lot of credit for the way he got Kristen to the hospital, end quote. Little Kristen spent 2 weeks under close medical care in the facility. Her brain was swelling and her lungs, clogged during the disaster, had to be continually suctioned. Against the odds, she survived. At the time, Monique was only 17 years old and facing a life as a single mother. The tornado changed her outlook completely. It changed me. A tornado changes everyone, she said. It's like you see your whole life go by you in 5 seconds, all the mean things you've done to people, and you wonder why you weren't nicer to people. She described how close she came to giving her daughter up, admitting, quote, I got mad because there are so many things I want to accomplish. I'm an impatient person. I tried to imagine not having her, but it's too hard. I'd have to be crazy to give her up." End quote. In the end, Monique said the tornado gave her something she hadn't expected: perspective. Quote, "I see life in a lot of different ways. I appreciate the things I have a lot more," she said. "I still have doubts, but I know there's a pot of gold out there waiting for us. Things are starting to really look up." End quote.
What Monique says here carries so much weight for me. And it's, I read this 15 times when you send the script.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Not because it's polished or profound, but because it's so absolutely honest about what actually shifts when something like this happens. Like, there's so much honesty in what she says there. Like, she's really bearing herself there.
Yeah.
And you know that she feels this deeply in her soul. This isn't just some light, whatever. You can tell she feels it deeply. And I think I kind of understand this because of, we're about a week away from my cancer surgery this time last year.
Yeah.
Right? Where I had, and I think this is why I'm happy right now, because I've had profound shifts. And what I realize is, what she's circling here isn't a sudden change in scale. It's plans and ambitions only make sense inside a world that feels reliable not enough to carry them. That's what she's feeling, right? Mm-hmm. And when reliability disappears, even briefly, the future stops being something you move towards and collapses into what's present, right?
Yeah.
And that's, so what I realize is life in two ways, as you get older, right? As you get older, but also when you've had these things happen to you, life narrows. I don't know how to describe it. So before this happens, everything's wide and you can float around, but it narrows and it focuses you, and you actually can live a life of more depth because of this narrowing in some ways.
Because you're reminded of your mortality.
And you're reminded of what really matters, and you stop flitting around and you focus. Like Mike, I call people more. Like, I call my mom more. Like, I call my brother more since all the cancer stuff. I call Mrs. Brown more, right? Sorry, Meredith's mom, right?
Oh, I understand. Yeah.
And I focus, and when I'm with Justin, I'm having deeper conversations. It's just, this is what happened, right?
The main tornado dissipated around 4 p.m., though tornado warnings remained in effect into the evening as additional severe storms continued across central and southern Alberta. By the time the tornado lifted, the scale of destruction was becoming clear to emergency services and city officials. Entire sections of southeast Edmonton were without power. Hundreds of structures were damaged or destroyed. Thousands of residents were displaced, many with no immediate access to shelter or basic necessities. The physical landscape had been altered in ways that would take months and in some cases years to repair. What made the destruction particularly difficult to process was how quickly it had occurred. Areas that had been functioning normally less than an hour earlier were now unrecognizable. Familiar landmarks were gone. Streets were blocked or erased. The boundary between public space and private life had collapsed into a shared field of debris. This was not a slow-moving disaster. There was no gradual escalation. The tornado delivered its damage in concentrated bursts, leaving behind scenes that responders and residents alike struggled to comprehend. As emergency crews began search and rescue operations, they did so in an environment that was unstable, cluttered, and dangerous, with the full extent of injuries and fatalities still unknown. For CBC's 25th anniversary coverage of the tornado, Adam Kavanagh, who was at the time of the tornado an 8-year-old in Millwoods, later recalled returning to school. Quote, "Everyone was in shock, but kids that are 7 or 8 years old can't completely comprehend the damage. Our teacher decided to have a discussion about what had happened, and one girl, Tina, broke down completely, crying and screaming. We found out later that the roof had been ripped off of her house while they were taking shelter. Her house was basically destroyed." End quote. In its post-event assessment, the Government of Canada later described the moment in rather restrained language. On the afternoon of Friday, July 31st, 1987, a tornado ripped through the eastern part of Edmonton and parts of neighboring Strathcona County. End quote. That's it. In a Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission transcript reviewing emergency communications failures, Environment Canada meteorologist Dr. John Rutherford addressed the issue of poor emergency communication directly and plainly. Quote, "There were problems in the technology of tornado warning." And he also identified the difficulty in the chain of getting warnings produced by the Weather Service to the users, and this was simply because there was no way to force the television stations and radio stations to issue the warning when they received it. That gap meant warnings existed without certainty that they would reach the people who needed them. Even when they did, the language was technical. Terms like watch and warning were not widely understood. For many listeners, they blended into the background noise of routine weather updates. The people who needed to know that it was coming didn't. Emergency services were operating normally. Fire halls were staffed at standard levels. Ambulances were not staged for a mass casualty response. Hospitals had no reason to activate disaster protocols. Transit systems continued running. There was no citywide alert. No siren sounded across Edmonton. No coordinated instruction told people where to go or what to do. The absence of panic was not negligence, it was familiarity. Storms had passed through before without consequence. The assumption was that this was one just like that and would do exactly the same. The Province of Alberta report would later summarize the critical problem without embellishment. Quote, "There was little time for protective action once the tornado entered the city." End quote. By the time the tornado crossed into southeast Edmonton, there was no opportunity for organized evacuation. People were where they already were, at home, at work, in cars, or outdoors watching the sky. What makes that moment so difficult to revisit is how ordinary it felt right up until the end. In total, 27 people were killed. More than 300 were injured. Thousands were displaced from their homes, many with nothing salvageable. Emergency shelters were established to house residents who had lost everything. The economic cost of the tornado was unprecedented in Canada at the time. Damage estimates reached approximately $332 million in 1987 dollars, making it the most expensive tornado in Canadian history. When adjusted for inflation, the cost would be significantly higher today. The financial impact included residential losses, commercial and industrial damage, infrastructure repair, emergency response, and long-term recovery. Government response unfolded at the municipal, provincial, and federal levels. The city of Edmonton declared a local emergency. Provincial resources were mobilized to support search and rescue, medical care, and temporary housing. The Canadian Armed Forces assisted with logistics and cleanup. Financial assistance programs were established to help residents and businesses begin rebuilding. In the aftermath, formal reviews examined how warnings were issued and how emergency systems functioned. Of the most significant outcomes was the development of improved public alerting mechanisms in Alberta. The 1987 tornado directly contributed to the creation of the Alberta Emergency Public Warning System, which introduced clearer warning protocols and broader dissemination of emergency messages. This system later became a model for emergency alerting across the province and influenced national approaches to public warnings. The disaster also prompted changes in emergency preparedness planning. Municipal and provincial authorities revised disaster response procedures, improved coordination between agencies, and expanded public education around severe weather risks. Tornado awareness and safety messaging became more prominent, particularly in urban areas that had previously considered themselves at low risk. Building standards and safety practices were also reviewed. While no single piece of legislation can be traced solely to the tornado, the event accelerated discussions around construction practices, particularly for mobile homes. Improved anchoring and tie-down requirements were emphasized in subsequent standards to reduce vulnerability to extreme winds.
Yeah. Warnings improve, buildings get stronger, outcomes shift slightly, but the balance will never change, right?
Right.
These measures don't tame the force itself. They just reduce how much of us it takes next time, really.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
This is nature, and it's just about being prepared, but no matter how prepared you are, it's going to be ugly.
Yeah. The Edmonton tornado marked a turning point in how severe weather was understood and managed in Canada. It demonstrated that large cities were not immune to violent storms, that warning systems required clarity and reach, and that preparedness could not rely on assumptions shaped by past experience. The damage left behind was immense. The changes that followed reshaped emergency management across Alberta and left a lasting imprint on Canadian disaster planning. At the top of this episode, you might have noticed that I said the Edmonton tornado was the second deadliest tornado in Canadian history. That distinction exists because one other disaster stands above it in terms of loss of life. In June of 1912, a massive tornado tore through Regina, killing at least 28 people and destroying large sections of the young prairie city. Known historically as the Regina Cyclone, it remains Canada's deadliest tornado and one of the most destructive natural disasters in the country's history. It, too, is a story of warning signs ignored, rapid urban devastation, and long-term consequences that reshaped a city. We'll most likely return to that event in a future episode. And that's it for Dark Poutine episode 402, Black Friday, the 1987 Edmonton tornado.
That's right. It's time for voicemails. You can leave us a message at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you. Let's see who called us this week.
All right, here's our first voicemail.
Oh, right into voicemails.
Shame on you for asking for money.
So this guy said, screw you for asking for money. I don't know if we actually ask for money. We
say become a Patreon, but yeah.
If you want to, we're not we're not demanding. And so what I'm curious about is whether this guy is willing to come over to my house and do whatever job he does for free. Because I'm curious about that. You know, it's like, what do you think?
Dear.
Do you think that Matthew and I are living high on the hog?
on the dark poutine money.
Oh no, I can barely take myself out for lunch.
Listen. When we ask for Patreon and stuff like that, it's like literally, guys. It's like if you can, great. It's helpful, but if you can't, we don't. It's fine as well.
No, and maybe this guy feels badly that he can't and doesn't want to hear that. You know,
a little bit helps, but I have another job, Mike. Like
I don't.
I'm just the talent. Mike has to do the writing and the editing, and I'm just the quirky other voice, and it's his full-time job. And yeah, he gets some money for advertising, but all the big companies changed algorithms, etc. And unless you're like superstar, millions
I'm not
and
Joe
millions,
Rogan
millions of listeners
No.
like every day, you don't make money off of that advertising.
Nope.
So yeah, screw you for saying screw you, buddy.
Thanks, Matthew. Here's our next one.
Hey guys, I wanted to tell you your Christmas story was wonderful. It was creative, it was imaginative, and it would have suited my nephew fine when he was 13. He unfortunately is now 40. So anyway, guys, just wanted to let you know what a wonderful job. Thank you. Bye-bye.
I worked so hard on writing that one.
Oh, Jesus.
No, Mike sent me drafts and was all excited, and he worked so hard on that. So we've had a few calls about that. So that makes me really happy. People are recognizing the creativity that you put in.
Well,
because you did, and you worked hard on it, Mike.
I want to do more creative stuff. I'm thinking about some creative projects in the future. I just need to wrap my ADHD brain around getting started. Like I said before, I had this podcast equipment 2 years before I actually started doing anything. So, oh well. Anyway, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And Matthew's responses were brilliant too, I must say. You played along marvelously, Matthew. I really appreciate your input into that.
Can't even remember what I said.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun. We had fun.
I remember having fun doing it, but I cannot remember anything I said.
Yeah. Well, it was so long ago now. It was in November.
I know. It's true.
All righty. Here's our last voicemail for today.
Hi, guys. This is Alicia calling. My husband Trevor got me onto your podcast, and I'm trying to get caught up because I stopped listening in 2022 because my mental health took a dive. But I'm absolutely loving what I'm listening to so far, and I'm hoping to get it caught up. I'm almost at episode 200, and there's like 200 more to go, so we'll see. Have a great day, and keep doing what you're doing. Okay, bye.
Well, thank you very much. I heard what sounded like children behind her. So I'm curious what she does for a living, Matthew. We actually forgot to give the last person a job who talked about her nephew.
Right.
Right. So let's do that first.
So I have a joke about how many nieces and nephews Jessica Fletcher has in
Murder, She Wrote?
Murder, She Wrote,
Yeah.
because every episode there's another niece or nephew. So I think she lives in a town called Cabbage Cove.
Cabbage Cove.
And she's a mystery writer with a nephew.
She's a mystery writer from Cabbage Cove. Well, that's fascinating. Yeah. I want to visit Cabbage Cove because I want to learn why on earth anybody would name a place Cabbage Cove. Yeah, it's fascinating.
And then Alicia, who just called.
Yes. So Alicia, who just called, where does she live and what does she
She's
do?
in Pennsylvania, and she goes out and for like dance music. You know, sometimes they do samples of like live stuff, like of like stuff from the world and ambient stuff. Mm-hmm. So she's like a sound producer, and she goes out and records little bits of real life for songs.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I'm thinking of that song called Children.
Children.
And it has children at the playground screaming just before it starts.
I don't know that one. Oh, Kids, you mean?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
By MGMT.
Yeah, Kids, not children. Right. I've heard it more than I've looked at the name.
Yeah,
Kids
that's
is a
why
great song.
I was like, what are you talking about?
Sorry, Kids.
Yeah, it's Kids.
Children.
Yeah,
Kids,
children,
that's a great
whatever.
song, isn't it? It's a great song.
It is. That's it for this week's voicemails. Again, you can leave us one at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you, even if it is just to say hi and to tell us to go shit in our hats. If you're stumped for what to chat with us about, a quick story is welcome. We do have some patrons this week, Matthew. How about them apples? Anyway, from Nanoose Bay in British Columbia, we have Cheryl Wilson. Cheryl Wilson from Nanoose Bay is a new patron, Matthew.
So she runs the Caboose Museum in Nanoose.
It's the caboose from Nanoose. That's kind of cool. I honestly, I loved
cabooses.
trains growing up, and I didn't really ever get to ride on a train until I was grown, which is kind of weird, but especially because trains are so ubiquitous all over the world. But honestly, I never got to ride a train until I was a grown-up.
Wow.
Maybe, unless you count the monorail at Disney World.
No,
I never got to ride a train, which is really, my parents hated me. It's because they never took me on a train.
I understand that.
Yeah. How they hate me? Oh, boy.
You made the joke. I'm just going with it.
Yeah. It was low-hanging fruit. Thank you, Cheryl Wilson. And next up, we have somebody whose name I recognize from the Umber Yard, Trish Dabkowski from Manchester, Connecticut. Thank you so much, Trish. Much appreciated. So what does our good friend Trish do there, Matthew, in Manchester, Connecticut? Or Connecticut?
Connecticut.
Yes.
I love that it's called Manchester.
Mm-hmm.
Trish has a Polish vodka brand called Dabkowski's.
There you go.
Yeah.
Dabkowski.
And there's a blade of grass in it.
Oh, boy. And the Dabkowski's vodka hammers you.
Hammers you. Good Polish vodka is good vodka.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't know.
Yeah,
I didn't care.
No?
I honestly didn't care whether it was good or not. Will it get me drunk was the question, and if the answer was yes, have at her.
Mine was, will it get me drunk and do I look good drinking it?
Oh, my goodness. Snob.
Yeah.
I'm here drinking Scope and NyQuil and shit like that, and Matthew's drinking fancy drinks.
Martini glasses.
No, with your martini glasses, trying to convince yourself you're not a drunk. Oh, well.
I had this if the bottle of wine is over $30, I'm not an alcoholic.
That's hilarious. I had one where somebody gave me like a liter of Mexican rum. And I thought to myself, if I can hang on to this for 6 months, I'm not an alcoholic. So I kept it in my room, and I was drunk all the time, but I didn't drink that.
You're hilarious.
So I wasn't an alcoholic because I wasn't drinking that.
The hoops you make in your head.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah. Anyway. Thanks to all our patrons and Donut Money donors, past and present, for your generosity. It helps to keep the show going. You can become a patron of Dark Poutine at patreon.com/darkpoutine. For a one-time donation, you can send us donut money via PayPal or interact using our email address, darkpoutinepodcast@gmail.com. If you don't already subscribe to the show, it would mean a lot if you did. You can easily find Dark Poutine on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. If you haven't gotten yours yet, my 2 books are available to order via links on the Dark Poutine website or anywhere fine books are sold. And speaking of darkpoutine.com, check it out for show notes and other cool stuff. We'd appreciate it if you gave Dark Poutine a like or a follow on Facebook and Instagram. Most importantly, thank you for listening. Tell your friends about us. Word of mouth is a powerful thing. And that is it for this episode of Dark Poutine. So until next time, don't forget to be a good egg and not a bad apple.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.